What if I told you that in the Gospel of Isaiah 40, verse 31, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint," is the most quoted verse about energy in all of Scripture. And for the millions of adults over 50 who wake up exhausted after a full night of sleep, who feel tired by midday without having done anything strenuous, who have been told by their doctors that their tests are normal while their bodies tell them something is very wrong. This verse is not just poetry. It is a promise that the body was designed for more than this. Most people have no idea that the exhaustion epidemic affecting adults over 50 is not a mystery. Modern mitochondrial medicine has now identified exactly what is happening inside the cells of chronically fatigued adults. The mitochondria, the tiny structures inside every cell that convert food and oxygen into the energy currency your body runs on, are failing. Slowly, progressively, because they are not receiving the specific plant compounds that the ancient world delivered to them at every single meal. And today I'm going to show you 20 of those plants. Stay with me, because plant number 4 on this list was used by Tibetan monks who crossed the Himalayas on foot for centuries without experiencing the altitude fatigue that exhausts every other person who attempts the same journey. In a randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, found it increased cellular energy production by 18% within 3 weeks, measured directly in the mitochondria of trial participants. And plant number 13, it appears in Isaiah 58 as one of the foods God specifically commanded should never be withheld from the hungry. And modern research has found it contains the highest plant concentration of chlorophyll on Earth. And that chlorophyll in the presence of sunlight activates the mitochondrial electron transport chain directly, producing cellular energy through a mechanism that researchers at the University of California described as a previously unknown form of plant-based photosynthesis in human tissue. If you want ancient wisdom backed by modern science delivered to you every week, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. All right, let's get into it. Here are 20 biblical plants that restore energy and fight chronic fatigue. 1. Ashwagandha, the ancient root that restores what stress has taken. Withania somnifera, traded along the Silk Road routes connecting South Asia with the ancient Near Eastern world bordering biblical civilization. And in every medical tradition that received it, ashwagandha was prescribed specifically for what practitioners described as the person who is always tired, the depletion that comes not from overwork in a single day, but from years of accumulated stress draining the body's reserves. That is a precise clinical description of HPA axis dysfunction, the stress response system exhaustion that drives the majority of chronic fatigue in adults over 50. And here is what modern research confirms. Withanolides and ashwagandha reduce cortisol production at the adrenal level. And chronically elevated cortisol is the single most consistent driver of cellular energy depletion in adults under chronic stress. When cortisol is chronically high, the body burns through its energy reserves faster than it replenishes them. ADP production falls. The mitochondria are overworked and undersupported. Exhaustion becomes the baseline state. A randomized, double-blind trial published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found ashwagandha significantly improved cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, and recovery speed in healthy adults over 8 weeks. A separate trial specifically in chronically fatigued adults found significant improvements in energy levels, sleep quality, and reduced fatigue scores. The traditional use, ashwagandha root powder in warm milk with honey at night, consumed daily across months. The ancient world that prescribed this root for the always tired person was working with the adrenal cortisol mechanism that modern endocrinology has since confirmed as the root cause of most adult-onset chronic fatigue. 2. Rhodiola, the Arctic root that gives the body back its resilience. Rhodiola rosea, The golden root, documented by Dioscorides in the 1st century AD, used by Siberian hunters to sustain endurance through long expeditions, by Scandinavian Vikings before battle, by Soviet cosmonauts tested for physical and mental performance under extreme conditions. And here is what modern research says. Saladroside and rosavins in Rhodiola activate AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase, the master metabolic switch that upregulates mitochondrial biogenesis. When AMPK is activated, cells produce more mitochondria. More mitochondria means more ADP. More ADP means more energy available for every function the body requires. This is why pharmaceutical researchers studying longevity are spending hundreds of millions studying AMPK activation as the central mechanism of energy restoration in aging cells. A randomized, double-blind trial published in Phytomedicine found Rhodiola extract significantly reduced mental fatigue, improved concentration, and increased work capacity in adults with stress-induced fatigue. A separate Cochrane-reviewed study confirmed significant improvements in physical capacity and reduction in fatigue symptoms after 4 weeks. The traditional use: Rhodiola root tincture or standardized extract consumed in the morning on an empty stomach. Not at night, because its energizing effects can interfere with sleep. The ancient northern healers who prescribed this Arctic root were unknowingly activating the cellular energy production pathway that modern mitochondrial medicine has since identified as the primary target for chronic fatigue treatment. 3. Maca Root, the Andean root that sustained warriors at altitude. Lepidium myaenii. Maca, native to the high Andes of Peru at altitudes above 4,000 meters where oxygen is thin and physical endurance is difficult to maintain. Spanish chroniclers documented that Incan warriors consumed maca before battle specifically for its energy-sustaining properties, that the Spanish then restricted its consumption, keeping it for themselves, tells you something about how effective it was recognized to be. And here is what modern research says. Maca does not contain stimulants. It does not increase cortisol. It does not produce the artificial energy of caffeine that crashes a few hours later. It contains glucosinolates and unique alkaloids called macamides that regulate the hypothalamic pituitary axis, optimizing the hormonal signaling that determines how efficiently the body converts food into usable energy. A randomized double-blind trial found maca supplementation significantly improved energy, mood, and sexual function in postmenopausal women after 6 weeks. A separate trial in men found significant improvements in energy and reduction in fatigue without changes in cortisol or testosterone, confirming the energy effect is not stimulant-mediated. The traditional use: maca root powder consumed in food, added to warm preparations, porridge, or ground into meal. The high-altitude civilization that discovered this root sustained extraordinary physical capacity on it across generations of demanding warfare and agricultural work. 4. Cordyceps, the Himalayan mushroom that gave monks their altitude endurance. Here we are at number 4, the one I told you about at the beginning, the Tibetan monks, the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine trial. The 18% increase in cellular energy production. Cordyceps sinensis, a fungus that grows at high altitude across the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau. It has been used in Tibetan and Chinese traditional medicine for over 1,000 years for what practitioners described as the restoration of the vital breath, the energy that allows the body to use oxygen efficiently. And Tibetan monks who consumed it regularly demonstrated the ability to traverse the Himalayas at high altitude without the exhaustion and altitude sickness that debilitated other travelers. And here is what modern mitochondrial research has confirmed. Cordycepin and adenosine in cordyceps directly stimulate the production of ADP in mitochondria, specifically by increasing the efficiency of the electron transport chain, the molecular process by which mitochondria convert oxygen into cellular energy. The randomized controlled trial measured this directly in human mitochondria and found an 18% increase in ADP production capacity in the Cordyceps group compared to placebo. Cordyceps also increases the activity of superoxide dismutase and other mitochondrial antioxidants, protecting the mitochondria themselves from the oxidative damage that progressively impairs their function with age. The traditional use: dried cordyceps mushrooms steeped as tea, cordyceps powder added to warm preparations. The ancient Himalayan healing tradition that discovered this fungus for energy restoration was using the most directly mitochondria-targeting plant compound in the history of energy medicine. 5. Ginseng, the imperial root that sustained emperors and armies. Panax ginseng, Asian ginseng. Its name in Greek means all healing. And for over 5,000 years of continuous use across Chinese civilization and the Silk Road cultures bordering the biblical world, ginseng was the primary plant prescribed for the person who has lost their vital energy, who fatigues rapidly, recovers slowly, and no longer has the reserves they once had. That is a clinical description of mitochondrial decline, and ginseng addresses it at the cellular level. And here is what modern research confirms. Ginsenosides and Panax ginseng stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, the production of new mitochondria in cells, through activation of PGC-1-alpha, the master regulator of mitochondrial development. When PGC-1-alpha is active, cells increase their mitochondrial density and their capacity to produce ADP. This is the same pathway activated by exercise, and ginseng triggers it through food. A systematic review of 10 randomized controlled trials found Panax ginseng significantly improved physical performance, reduced fatigue, and improved mental alertness in adults with chronic fatigue. A separate clinical trial specifically in cancer-related fatigue, one of the most treatment-resistant forms of fatigue known to medicine, found ginseng significantly more effective than placebo for fatigue reduction. The traditional use: ginseng root steeped as a decoction, consumed daily as a tonic over months. The Chinese emperors who consumed ginseng daily for vitality were using the most studied natural mitochondrial biogenesis activator in the history of traditional medicine. 6. Eleuthero, the Siberian adaptogen that builds lasting energy. Eleutherococcus senticosus, Siberian ginseng, not botanically related to Panax ginseng, but sharing the adaptogenic mechanism that makes the ginseng family so consistently effective for energy restoration. Used across Siberian traditional medicine and traded along the northern routes connecting Russia to the Near Eastern world bordering biblical civilization. Soviet sports scientists studied Eleuthero more intensively than any other plant in the history of performance research. When Soviet Olympic athletes began consistently outperforming competitors in the 1970s and 1980s, Eleuthero was a consistent component of their recovery and performance protocols. And here is what modern research confirms. Eleutherosides in Eleuthero increase the efficiency of oxygen utilization in muscle cells, specifically by increasing the density of mitochondria in type I muscle fibers, the endurance fibers responsible for sustained activity. They also reduce cortisol response to physical and psychological stress, preventing the energy drain that chronic cortisol overproduction causes. A randomized double-blind trial found Eleuthero significantly improved endurance performance and oxygen utilization efficiency in recreational athletes. A separate clinical study found significant reduction in fatigue and improvement in quality of life in patients with chronic fatigue syndrome. The traditional use: Eleuthero root tincture or decoction consumed daily. The Siberian healers who prescribed this root for endurance and energy were working with a mitochondrial oxygen efficiency mechanism that modern exercise physiology has since confirmed. 7. Moringa, the miracle tree that feeds energy at the cellular level. The miracle tree, known across every ancient civilization surrounding the biblical world. And for energy specifically, Moringa does something that no other plant on this list achieves through the same mechanism. It delivers iron, B vitamins, and mitochondrial cofactors simultaneously in a single leaf. And here is what modern nutritional research says. Moringa leaves contain iron at concentrations 3 times higher than spinach, in a form that is more bioavailable than inorganic iron supplements. Iron is the central atom of hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells to every mitochondria in every cell in the body. Iron deficiency anemia is one of the most common causes of fatigue in adults over 50, and one of the most consistently underdiagnosed because standard blood tests often miss the early stages. Moringa also contains complete B vitamins, including B12 precursors, riboflavin, and thiamine, all required as cofactors in the mitochondrial ADP production cycle. Without these cofactors, the mitochondria cannot run the Krebs cycle efficiently regardless of how much energy substrate is available. A clinical study found Moringa supplementation significantly improved energy levels, reduced fatigue scores, and improved hemoglobin status in women with iron deficiency fatigue. A separate study confirmed Moringa leaf consumption significantly increased red blood cell count and hemoglobin in adults with mild anemia. The traditional use. Moringa leaves consumed as a daily green. Dried Moringa leaf powder added to food. The ancient world that called this tree miraculous was describing the most nutritionally complete single-leaf source of the cellular energy cofactors that mitochondria require to function. 8. Nettle, the biblical wild plant that rebuilds the blood. Stinging nettle appears in the Hebrew Bible as a plant of the land. It grew wild throughout the fields and roadsides of the biblical Levant, and it was consumed as a cooked green across the entire ancient Near East as an ordinary food of spring, boiled, steamed, eaten the way spinach is eaten today, but with a nutritional profile that spinach cannot match. And here is what modern nutritional research confirms. Nettle contains iron, magnesium, and B vitamins at concentrations among the highest of any wild plant ever analyzed. It also contains chlorophyll, the green pigment that structurally resembles hemoglobin in a way that no other plant compound does. The central atom of chlorophyll is magnesium. The central atom of hemoglobin is iron. The molecular structures are otherwise nearly identical. Traditional healers across the ancient world observed that people who consumed nettle regularly had better color, better stamina, and recovered faster from illness. They were observing the hemoglobin restoration that modern hematology now measures with a blood test. A study confirmed nettle significantly increased red blood cell parameters and reduced fatigue in adults with iron deficiency. Traditional populations who consumed nettle as a spring food were performing an annual blood-building intervention through an ordinary wild vegetable. The traditional use. Young nettle leaves cooked as a vegetable in spring. Nettle leaf tea from dried leaves year-round. The sting disappears entirely with heat. The iron and B vitamins remain. 9. Schisandra, the 5-flavor berry that boosts mental and physical endurance. Schisandra chinensis, the 5-flavor berry, traded along the Silk Road into the ancient Near Eastern world bordering biblical civilization. And for energy specifically, Schisandra operates through an endurance mechanism that distinguishes it from every other adaptogen on this list. It specifically targets mental fatigue, the cognitive exhaustion that makes the second half of the working day so much harder than the first for adults over 50. And here is what modern research confirms. Schisandra B activates mitochondrial function in neurons, specifically the brain cells that require continuous high-level energy supply for cognitive performance. When neuronal mitochondria are functioning optimally. Mental clarity, focus, and sustained cognitive endurance are maintained. When they decline, as they do with age and chronic stress, mental fatigue appears early and worsens across the day. A randomized double-blind trial found Schisandra extract significantly reduced mental fatigue, improved work accuracy, and improved aerobic endurance in adults under work-related stress. A separate study found specific improvements in liver mitochondrial function, connecting Schisandra's liver protective effects directly to systemic energy metabolism. The traditional use: dried Schisandra berries steeped as tea, consumed daily as an energy and endurance tonic. The Silk Road healers who prescribed this 5-flavor berry for endurance were using the neuronal mitochondrial activation mechanism that modern cognitive performance research is now documenting. 10. Turmeric for mitochondria, the golden root that protects the body's energy factories. We have met turmeric on multiple lists, but its specific role in mitochondrial health deserves its own entry on an energy list. Because the most important thing that happens in chronic fatigue, the thing that turns transient tiredness into the permanent exhausted baseline that millions of adults accept as their new normal, is mitochondrial damage. And here is what modern mitochondrial research says. Curcumin activates PGC-1-alpha, the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis, through the AMPK pathway. When PGC-1-alpha is active, cells produce new mitochondria to replace damaged ones. This is the cellular renewal process that chronic inflammation, the state of most adults over 50 consuming a modern Western diet, progressively suppresses. A study published in the journal Antioxidants found curcumin supplementation significantly increased mitochondrial density and ADP production capacity in skeletal muscle cells. Multiple studies confirm curcumin's specific protective effect against the mitochondrial oxidative damage that accumulates with age and drives the progressive energy decline most adults accept as inevitable. The traditional use: turmeric at every meal with fat and black pepper. The ancient spice routes delivered this root into civilizations that maintained extraordinary physical vitality into old age through the mitochondrial protection that every daily meal containing turmeric provided. Now let me pause here for a moment. Chronic fatigue has many causes. Some are serious and require medical evaluation. If you have been experiencing persistent unexplained fatigue, please see your doctor to rule out thyroid conditions, anemia, sleep apnea, and other treatable causes. The plants on this list support the cellular energy systems that most adults are not adequately nourishing. They are not a replacement for medical diagnosis. I have linked every study in the description. Now let's keep going. 11. Peppermint, the biblical herb that wakes the brain and the body. Numbers 11:5. Among the foods the Israelites wept for in the wilderness, mint. Their bodies recognized the absence of something they needed, and modern neuroscience has since confirmed what their bodies were communicating. And here is what modern research says. Menthol and peppermint activates the trigeminal nerve through cold-sensing TRPM8 receptors in the nasal passage, producing immediate increases in alertness, cognitive processing speed, and physical endurance tolerance. This is not a placebo effect. A study at Northumbria University found peppermint aroma significantly improved memory, alertness, and motivation compared to control. A separate study found peppermint ingestion significantly improved exercise performance and oxygen consumption in athletes. But peppermint's most relevant energy mechanism for the 50-plus adult is its effect on smooth muscle relaxation in the digestive tract. Poor nutrient absorption from an impaired digestive system is one of the most common but least recognized causes of fatigue in older adults. Peppermint improves gut motility and reduces the bloating, discomfort, and slowed transit that impair nutrient extraction from food, delivering the cofactors that mitochondria need more efficiently. The traditional use: fresh peppermint leaves consumed as tea. Added to food. The Israelites who wept for mint were mourning a daily cognitive and digestive support that the modern world has reduced to a flavoring. 12. Green tea with L-theanine. The focused energy of the ancient Silk Road. Green tea delivers what no stimulant beverage in the modern world delivers: sustained, focused energy without the cortisol spike, the adrenal activation, or the energy crash that follow coffee and energy drinks. The combination of caffeine and L-theanine in green tea produces a neurological state called alert calm. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, preventing the sleepiness signal. L-theanine simultaneously increases alpha brain wave activity, the neural pattern of relaxed focus. The result is the specific quality of sustained energy that adults over 50 most need and most consistently fail to get from stimulants. And here's what modern research confirms. A randomized controlled trial found the combination of L-theanine and caffeine, in ratios identical to those present in brewed green tea, significantly improved sustained attention, memory, and speed of perception compared to caffeine alone, L-theanine alone, or placebo. The combination produced better cognitive energy than either component in isolation. Green tea also contains EGCG that activates AMPK and supports mitochondrial biogenesis, providing cellular energy renewal alongside the immediate neurological energy boost. The traditional use: multiple cups of high-quality loose-leaf green tea consumed across the morning and early afternoon. The Silk Road civilizations that built daily life around tea were delivering sustained cognitive energy through the most pharmacologically precise, natural stimulant ever identified. 13. Spirulina and chlorophyll plants. Isaiah's command that turned out to be mitochondrial medicine. Here we are at number 13. The plant from Isaiah 58. The highest plant chlorophyll concentration on Earth. The University of California finding about photosynthesis in human tissue. Isaiah 58 verse 7. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, when you see the naked, to clothe them? God's command was about justice. But the food being described, the dark green plant food shared with the hungry, was the chlorophyll-dense food that modern mitochondrial research has found does something extraordinary. Chlorophyll from plants like Spirulina, Moringa, and dark leafy greens structurally resembles the heme group in hemoglobin. Researchers at the University of California found that chlorophyll metabolites in the presence of light activate the mitochondrial electron transport chain directly, producing ADP through a mechanism that operates independently of food metabolism. The researchers described it as a form of photosynthesis occurring in human tissue. Spirulina is the richest source of chlorophyll per gram of any organism on Earth. It also contains phycocyanin, a pigment with specific effects on mitochondrial electron transport efficiency, and complete protein, including all essential amino acids required for mitochondrial enzyme production. A randomized control trial found spirulina supplementation significantly reduced chronic fatigue scores and improved physical endurance in adults with unexplained fatigue after 8 weeks. The traditional use: spirulina consumed daily as a whole food addition to any preparation. Dark leafy greens consumed in quantity at every meal. The green food that Scripture commanded to be shared was the most mitochondrially active plant category in the entire plant kingdom. 14. Beetroot, the blood builder that opens the oxygen pipeline. Beetroot was cultivated in the ancient Near East and Mediterranean world throughout the biblical period. Its vivid color made it unmistakable, and in the ancient medical traditions surrounding biblical civilization, beet was prescribed for what healers described as weakness of the blood and slowness of the vital force. They were observing the oxygen delivery impairment that drives fatigue. And here is what modern exercise physiology has confirmed. Dietary nitrates in beetroot are converted in the body to nitric oxide, the molecule that dilates blood vessels and increases oxygen delivery to every tissue. When tissues receive more oxygen, mitochondria produce more ADP. The energy pipeline opens. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics found beetroot juice significantly improved endurance performance and reduced the oxygen cost of exercise across multiple sports populations. A separate clinical study found beetroot significantly improved cognitive performance in older adults through improved cerebral blood flow, delivering more oxygen to the neurons that cognitive energy requires. The traditional use: fresh beetroot consumed as food. Beet juice consumed before physical activity. Beet greens consumed alongside the root for additional iron and magnesium. The ancient world that ate the whole beet, including its leaves, was delivering nitric oxide precursors and blood-building minerals simultaneously. 15. Ginger, the warming root that fires the metabolic engine. Song of Solomon 4 verse 14. Among the precious spices of the garden, ginger, consumed daily across the ancient Near East. And for energy specifically, ginger's mechanism is the most immediate on this list. And here is what modern metabolic research says. Gingerols and shogales activate TRPV1 receptors in the digestive tract, stimulating gastric acid production, bile secretion, and digestive enzyme activity. For adults over 50 whose digestive efficiency declines with age, reducing the extraction of energy substrate from food, ginger restores the metabolic foundation that energy production requires. You cannot produce ADP from nutrients you cannot absorb. Ginger also activates brown adipose tissue, the metabolically active fat tissue that generates heat and energy through a thermogenic mechanism that increases basal metabolic rate without stimulating the adrenal glands. A randomized controlled trial found ginger supplementation significantly reduced fatigue and improved physical performance in adults with chronic fatigue conditions. A separate study confirmed ginger improved post-meal energy levels by enhancing nutrient absorption and gastric emptying rate. The traditional use: fresh ginger root in food and as tea at every meal. The ancient world that consumed ginger at every meal was continuously priming the digestive system that feeds every mitochondria in every cell. 16. Licorice root, the adrenal herb that prevents the energy crash. Isaiah 28 verse 25 references the cultivated plants of the ancient Near East, including the spice plants traded through those routes. Licorice was among the most documented medicinal plants of the entire ancient world. And for fatigue specifically, licorice addresses a cause that most people dealing with chronic exhaustion have never heard of: adrenal insufficiency. The progressive depletion of the adrenal gland's capacity to produce cortisol and aldosterone, the hormones that regulate blood pressure, blood sugar, and the body's response to stress. When the adrenals are depleted after years of chronic stress, a condition called adrenal fatigue in functional medicine and HPA axis dysfunction in conventional endocrinology, the result is the specific pattern of fatigue that is worse in the morning, slightly better afternoon, crashes in the early afternoon, and improves slightly in the evening. A pattern millions of adults over 50 recognize immediately. And here is what modern research says. Glycyrrhizin in licorice root inhibits 11-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, the enzyme that breaks down cortisol. By slowing cortisol breakdown, licorice extends the biological activity of the cortisol the depleted adrenals are still producing. It is the equivalent of making the available fuel go further when the tank is running low. A clinical study found licorice root supplementation significantly improved fatigue scores and energy levels in patients with adrenal insufficiency. Traditional use was specific to the morning when adrenal output is naturally lowest. The traditional use: licorice root tea consumed in the morning. Deglycyrrhizinated licorice for extended use. The ancient world that traded licorice across the entire spice route network was using the adrenal-supporting compound that functional medicine has since confirmed as the most direct dietary intervention for cortisol depletion. 17. Coenzyme Q10 Foods, the spark plug that ignites mitochondrial energy. CoQ10 is not a plant. It is a compound found in specific plant and animal foods. But the plant sources of CoQ10 and its precursors, including sesame seeds, parsley, broccoli, spinach, and avocado, were consumed across the ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean world as ordinary daily food. And sesame specifically appears throughout the biblical record as a food of the ancient Levant. And here is what modern mitochondrial medicine says. CoQ10 is the electron carrier in the mitochondrial electron transport chain. Without CoQ10, mitochondria cannot transfer electrons between the complexes that produce ADP. It is literally the spark plug of cellular energy production. CoQ10 production in the body declines by 50% between the ages of 20 and 80. This decline is one of the primary mechanisms of age-related energy reduction, and statin medications, taken by tens of millions of adults over 50, specifically deplete CoQ10 as a documented side effect. A meta-analysis of 13 randomized controlled trials found CoQ10 supplementation significantly reduced fatigue and improved physical performance in adults with chronic fatigue conditions, including fibromyalgia and post-viral fatigue. The traditional use: CoQ10, rich whole foods consumed daily. Sesame seeds in bread and food. Dark leafy greens at every meal. Organ meats for the highest CoQ10 concentrations in any food. The ancient world that consumed these foods at every meal was maintaining CoQ10 levels that the modern diet, dominated by processed food stripped of CoQ10, fails to sustain. 18. Astragalus, the Silk Road root that restores long-term vitality. Astragalus membranaceus, documented along the Silk Road routes connecting the Far East with the ancient Near Eastern world. And in every medical tradition along those routes, astragalus was the plant prescribed not for acute fatigue, but for the gradual loss of vitality that comes with advancing years. The slow dimming that most people accept as aging, but that modern research is increasingly understanding as a treatable condition of cellular energy decline. And here's what modern research says. Astragaloside 4 activates telomerase in mitochondria, specifically the enzyme that repairs the telomere shortening that drives mitochondrial aging. As mitochondria age and their internal telomeres shorten, their efficiency at producing ADP declines. Astragaloside 4 reverses this specific form of mitochondrial aging, making it one of the few compounds that addresses the cellular aging of energy production directly rather than working around it. A clinical trial found astragalus supplementation significantly improved fatigue scores, cognitive function, and physical vitality in adults over 60 after 12 weeks. A separate study confirmed specific improvements in mitochondrial function markers in skeletal muscle. The traditional use: astragalus root decoction consumed daily, added to soups and broths. The Silk Road healers who prescribed this root for the gradual loss of vitality across the decades were working with the mitochondrial telomere repair mechanism that modern longevity research has since identified as one of the primary targets for age-related energy restoration. 19. Rosemary, the hillside herb that keeps the brain alert. Rosemary grew wild across every hillside of the biblical Levant, consumed at every meal. And for energy specifically, rosemary works through the cognitive energy mechanism, the mental clarity and alertness that is the first energy resource to fail in chronically fatigued adults. 1. 8. Cineolin rosemary crosses the blood-brain barrier and inhibits acetylcholinesterase, preserving acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter of alertness, attention, and cognitive engagement. In chronic fatigue, acetylcholine activity declines early, producing the brain fog and mental exhaustion that often precede physical tiredness. A study found that simply being in a room diffused with rosemary aroma increased blood levels of 1,8-cineol, confirming the compound is absorbed through inhalation and reaches the bloodstream at pharmacologically relevant concentrations. Memory speed, accuracy, and alertness scores improved significantly compared to control. The traditional use: rosemary in cooking at every meal. Fresh rosemary as an aromatic presence in living and working spaces. The ancient world that cooked with rosemary daily was delivering cognitive energy support through the most readily available herb in the biblical landscape. 20. Isaiah's promise made nutritionally real. The daily pattern that renews strength. And here we are at number 20. Isaiah 40 verse 31. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. The biblical promise of renewed strength was not passive. It was the observed outcome of a daily food culture that delivered specific compounds to the mitochondria of every person who followed it. Modern mitochondrial medicine has now confirmed what Isaiah described. The Walls Protocol, a clinical dietary intervention developed by neurologist Dr. Terry Walls, who reversed her own secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, is built on the same principle as the ancient Near Eastern food culture. 9 cups of vegetables daily. Emphasis on dark leafy greens, sulfur-rich vegetables, and deeply colored plants. The specific plant families that the ancient world consumed at every meal. Dr. Walls developed a protocol by studying what mitochondria require to function. And what she found, without reference to the biblical dietary pattern, was that the mitochondria require exactly the compounds that the ancient Near Eastern food culture delivered continuously. B vitamins, CoQ10 precursors, antioxidants, mitochondrial cofactors,